My name is Joan Gibbs, and as I said before, I'm a member of New York, New Jersey, Cuba C. I will be moderating this next plenary. With the election of Donald Trump, as has been previously alluded to, our work has become even more urgent and critical as we face a regime determined to turn back the clock, erase the gains that we have made in several areas, including with respect to Cuba. Each day, it seems brings a new attack. Yesterday, for example, it was announced that Trump had approved the Coda pipeline, notwithstanding the widespread opposition to it. However, on the same day, in a positive sign, thanks to thousands of people throughout the United States who took to the streets, called, emailed, tweeted their congressional representative, signed electronic petitions, Trump and his allies were unable to replace and repeal the Affordable Care Act with something even worse. But meanwhile, and something that we haven't really talked about in a while, reportedly 200 civilians were killed in Iraq in a U.S. strike. It is our hope that this plenary will produce action resolutions articulating popular education campaigns, mass protests, legislative initiatives efforts, electronic petitions, a social media blitz nationally, regionally, and locally, demanding full normalization of Cuba-U.S. relations. In so doing, it is also our hope that we increase our numbers exponentially. We will be hearing from 3 speakers, each of whom will speak for 10 to 15 minutes, following which we will take questions and comments from the audience. Our first speaker will be Dr. Rosemary Mealy. I could say a lot about Rosemary, but suffice it to say here, Rosemary is a longtime Cuba Solidarity activist, a member of the board of IFCO Pastors for Peace, and an author of, among other works, Fidel and Malcolm, Memories of a Meeting. Our second speaker will be Newark Mayor Ras Baraka. Ras Baraka will talk about the Newark Municipal Initiative with respect to engaging with Cuba. Mayor Baraka will be followed by Mary Ada Ulysses, the Executive Director of the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance, which has worked tirelessly to bring artists and cultural performers to the United States and a true expression of people-to-people engagement and solidarity. Thank you again for your time and hopefully your attention. Dr. Mealy.
Thank you, Joan. And first, I would like to thank the entire Cuban delegation for taking time out to come to this program, and also to our guest speakers, and to you who took your time out today to come to this program, and also from wherever you originated from. If you notice, this is the only plenary outside of the workshops that is focused on the specifics of the question that we're faced with today. I would be remiss if I did not state that there have been some ideological struggles within our planning group about which is the best way forward when we discuss the issue of US-Cuba normalization. But I have to say that those discussions were all in good faith, supportive, but also left the challenge to those of us who organized this plenary to present as clear as possible what the focus of the plenary is and why we requested to do a special plenary session. The focus of this plenary is to consider strategies to broaden, B-R-O-A-D-E-N, the left agenda. By that I mean to broaden the left agenda into political spheres that focus on some of the other dimensions of normalization. And for those who are engaged in aspects of struggling for the full normalization of US-Cuba relations, we will hear from two of our guests as mentioned. But I also must say here that we were asked to send regrets of two of the members of Congress who are unable to be here because of yesterday, and also that is Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, and also not able to be with us today, nor any of his representatives or members of Senator Leahy's office of Vermont. Also unable to be with us here today was a representative of Google. So what are they talking about? And also the representative of Stonegate Bank of Florida, which is the only bank that has permission to establish an entity in Cuba, sends his regards sincerely that he is unable to be here. But in the future, if we should have such a conference, Stonegate Bank will be one of the entities that we would invite again. So I'm naming some entities that many of us in this room are in opposition to, but if the Cubans can deal with them, why can't we? It is our position that we cannot ignore the economic dimensions of normalization and yield to the likes and reasoning and interests of the business sector who, granted, have been in the forefront of the normalization process, but for some of them for different reasons. We are not naive in our observations that some forces have been engaging Cuba purely from a capitalist-oriented mindset which attempts to promote economic relations for the most part that are designed to undermine the socialist character and development of the country. While there are other groups, elected officials, and corporate entities who have been working towards normalization, and their efforts came into fruition on December 17, 2014, after more than 5 decades of non-existing diplomatic ties between the United States and Cuba, when a new chapter in US-Cuba relations was announced by President Barack Obama. Then on July 1st, 2015, when Obama announced the decision to reestablish diplomatic relations between the United States and Cuba effective July 20th, with the reopening of embassies in both countries, the policies outlined in the executive order merit full reading if you haven't done so, and analyzing specifically where it's written, quote, this is the United States, through the opening of embassies, the United States is now able to engage more broadly across all sectors of Cuban society, including the government, civil society, and the general public. End of quote. 2 years later, on March 26, 2016, another historic milestone was marked when the President made the historic trip to Havana and met with President Raul Castro. The normalization process between the United States and Cuba ushered in complexities where each new phase of negotiations have set forth in the bilateral discussions an indispensable set of guidelines and references regarding the way forward, which are rooted in the Charter of the United Nations, generally referenced in international law, but more specifically, the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic and Consular Relations. Cuban President Raul Castro referenced the international instruments on January the 28th at the Community of Latin America and Caribbean States, CELAC, summit, which is an important regional organization which serves as a platform for dialogue between Latin America, the Caribbean, and the global economics, when he stated, the president of Cuba stated, it is essential to build a world of peace governed by the principles of the United Nations Charter and international law, without which development is impossible. Furthermore, the president offered, in respects to reestablishing of diplomatic relations between Washington and Havana, and I quote, as I have repeatedly stated, Cuba and the United States must learn the art of civilized coexistence. Civilized coexistence. And that is an art that those of us in the left need to practice and learn, that we have to coexist in a civilized manner if we are going to broaden this movement for the full dimensions of economic reestablishment of economic relations between Cuba and the United States. So the question that we are posing as solidarity activists is, how do we engage those forces and expand our solidarity efforts with those who represent the coalitions of private companies, farmers and organizations, and local leaders who are dedicated to lifting the more than 55-year-old blockade, but they may call it an embargo. However, many of these groups also work under the operative notion of what I call the theory of incremental normalization. This process, or this theory of incremental normalization, is what we see happening. What has opened allows you to move at various stages and levels of engaging Cuba. But we are demanding not incremental normalization. We are demanding full normalization between the United States and Cuba, and the only way that we can do that is to work with some of those entities that we may not like to work with. I'm talking about the legislators pulling up our pants, tightening our belts, going into Congress, lobbying, and the kinds of things that Joan mentioned that we said that we wanted to do and to have emerge from this group. On July 20th, for example, on July 20th, 2015, Cuba's International Commercial Bank and the US, as I mentioned, the Stonegate Bank, reached the first important financial accord to be signed since the reestablishment of diplomatic relations. We need to know from that entity, how did you do that? Does anybody in here know how it was done? We need to engage to find out how it was done. How is it now that if you travel to Havana, you can actually get a credit card from Stonegate Bank so that you can use it there if you want to? You may not want to do that, but that's an aspect of engagement that particular entity was able to deal with. Now, on January 18th, 2 days before the US President-elect Donald Trump was sworn into office, the first 40-ton shipment in decades of marabou charcoal arrived in the United States from Cuba, representing a historic occasion, the first export of Cuban goods to the United States in 5 decades. And by the way, according to GRANMA, the official organ of the Communist Party of Cuba, and what we all should read and access online, the product will be sold at $420 per ton. the highest price achieved by Cuba export in over 10 years, marking this product, which normally sells on the international market for between $340 and $380 US. This historic deal was the result of an agreement signed between Cuba Export Entity and US-Cuba Trading Limited, which is a Washington, D.C. company, right? And that took place at midday on the 5th of January at Cuba's Ministry of Foreign Trade and Investment. By the way, we did invite the president of that export company to be here today to explain to us, how did you do that, and what can we do as a solidarity movement to encourage that? But unfortunately, again, he was unable to be here. In sincerity, there were some declines that we got that we knew were not sincere. We also invited the sister, the Cuban sister who signed that accord, Isabel O'Reilly, who is president of Cuba Trading, LLC, and unfortunately, we were unable to get her here from Cuba because it would have been important for you, the same way that you're listening to the other Cuban comrades, compañeros y compañeras, to understand, to know how were you able to do that kind of an engagement. We need to know who that entity is in the United States that we can begin to talk to as well. So U.S. companies such as Cuba fall within what as I mentioned earlier, the sphere of incremental normalization, which in my personal opinion lends itself to eventually those groups can play a fuller role, in a more integrative role, incorporated into the demand for full normalization of US-Cuba relations, where one colleague, when I talked to him about this, who's in this room, that I met over the phone, where he reminded, quote, that there must be the, quote, whole base involved in a movement across the spectrum that will be responsible for the eventual victory, end of quote. Finally, our demand for full U.S. normalization must also incorporate and support Cuba's claims against the United States for the human and economic damage arising from the blockade, to the tune of more than $120 billion. And at the 2015 meeting with President Barack Obama in New York, President Raul Castro said the embargo had cost Cuba $1.1 trillion. We have to integrate that demand as well when we call for full U.S. normalizations between the U.S. and Cuba, and we must not be stalled by the legal logic that we see occurring in the courts, particularly out of Miami, where many have these claims, they have these legal claims against Cuba that they must be, those claims must be dealt with before there can be any normalization. But our argument should be the one that I just posed here. So my time has run out, but we can discuss further because I know that there will be individuals in here who will disagree with this perspective, but our position and something that we learned from Fidel, and we all loved Comandante, and we all studied the July 26 movement. The Cuban Revolution was won because they knew how to practice unity, had disagreements, never giving up our principles. We will never give up our principles, but we also recognize that the economic dimensions of normalization demand that we as a solidarity movement consider this in our discussions when we talk about full US-Cuba normalizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Our next speaker will be the Honorable Ras Baraka, who's the mayor of Newark.
Good afternoon. I want to first thank Rosemary Mealy for her comments, but also her and the Minifu for running us down to make sure I get here. You know, to be on it and be consistent with it, to make sure. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and coincidentally, we are bringing a delegation to Cuba tomorrow, as a matter of fact. And this is probably the second time in, second time since I've been the mayor that we have made a trip. I went first, and this time we're bringing a mix of people, which was, lends to the comments that was just made. We're bringing a mix of different people, elected officials, some social kind of activists, medical folks, educators, as well as the container terminal that goes from the port. And that is very important for us because we are trying to establish trade between Cuba and the city of Newark. I mean, Newark obviously is has the second largest seaport in the United States. Many folks don't know that, but it's a fact. We have the largest seaport on the eastern seaboard, and the second, probably one of the second most modern ports in this country as well. So the kinds of goods and services that come through the port is very important, not just for the country, but also for the city of Newark. And we have our own personal or individual struggles with the port in order to make sure that we get jobs for city residents, that we get resources and goods and services from that port to the city of Newark. But when they raise the Bayonne Bridge and they widen the Panama Canal, it means that more of goods and services are going to be coming to Newark, which would make us in competition for almost the first largest seaport in this nation, which makes our geographic location incredibly important, not just to this country, but to us as residents of the city of Newark. And so many people in the city do not know the real importance of that port. We have not kept our eyes off of that since we got in there, and we have been struggling with them since then, and we're going to continue to struggle with them because we believe that we should get what we deserve. But more importantly, we think that we could be of help to Cuba by making sure that there is trade going back and forth from Cuba to the city's seaport in Newark. So we are excited about that. I'm excited about that. But on the other side, we're also excited about the idea of being able to bring some of our social scientists over there, bring some of the folks around healthcare, around education and literacy, to begin to get some of those things, those ideas, and bring them back to the city of Newark. I think one thing that the blockade has done, on a negative side for Cuba, we know about, right? We know about the material and monetary losses that was laid out, that Cuba suffered as a result of the blockade and the human condition. But what we don't talk about is how the blockade actually, made the rest of the country, the rest of the world, suffer because we have not been able to have access to different ideas, different cultural improvements, different kind of social advancements that were made in those conditions in Cuba. We're not privy to that. We only get the kind of a negative media that comes out constantly about what's going on in Cuba, and we do not have a real intellectual kind of engagement with the country. And I think that is incredibly important. The exchange of ideas, the exchange of culture, the exchange of social development is important, particularly in places like Newark, which is similar to many cities around this country, big and mid-sized cities that are predominantly, for the most part, black and brown and poor. That we have the opportunity to look at other countries that have gone through kind of miraculous social changes that would benefit cities like Newark around literacy, around medical improvements, around just being able to get folks the kind of medical attention that they need, right? The shots that children need. We're still poor in areas of infant mortality. We're still struggling around areas of literacy. It's almost embarrassing to talk about the literacy levels in cities like Newark and the literacy levels in Cuba. It's almost embarrassing to talk about, the kind of access to health care that we have in cities like Newark versus places like Cuba, right? It's embarrassing to talk about the graduation rates, how many people have attainment to university degrees versus what's happening in places like Newark. And I'm not singling Newark, I'm saying places like Newark, because there are many cities across America that have this same problem, the same demographic, and the same issue, right? Even the shots that children are supposed to get to go to school, or shots that babies get, the whole infant mortality rate in Newark is 4 times that of the state of New Jersey, right? So it is the access that young women get to medical care is atrocious versus places like Cuba. And we should be able to have those discussions, be able to have that intellectual dialogue, be able to figure out how to make these things happen. And it's puzzling to me that, the U.S. can have a relationship with China, can have a relationship with Russia, can have a relationship with other countries, but cannot have a relationship with Cuba. It just really doesn't make any logical sense. And you can see back and forth the struggle that they're having with Russia on the news now. Even though I'm not in that bag of believing that the Russians impacted our elections. I think the Republicans impacted our elections, right? I think them taking away Section 4A of the Voting Rights Act impacted the elections, right? And disenfranchising hundreds of thousands of people. I think all that other stuff is something that these folks want to deal with to take our mind off of what really happened here in these elections in the United States, that Americans are responsible for disenfranchising Americans, and that we have to have those discussions, right? And it's important to understand that even in the left community, that all of us won't agree, and period. In America, everybody in the world, we just won't agree. And to have these kind of inflexible positions makes it difficult for us to organize and expand or get other people to understand our points of view, right? It's difficult to get people to understand your point of view when you don't even want to entertain or listen to other people's point of view, right? So that in and of itself is incorrect. And if you call yourself an intellectual, right, and if you discover fire, then you should not be afraid to share it. So the opportunity to share your ideas is what intellectuals and academics want to do, what activists should be trying to do, share your ideas, right? And I think the validity of your idea, the pragmatism of your ideas win people over. And I think people are smart enough to make decisions on their own when given the facts and the truth. Right, so it's important. That's why I think it's important for us to allow information to come out of Cuba into cities and places like Newark, to allow people in these cities to begin to make decisions for themselves around what they think is right and viable for their lives, for their own community, for their own families. What kind of systems do they think should be in place versus what they have now? Like this whole debate that, other systems haven't worked around the world. Well, the system we have here has not worked for black and brown people in these cities. So, that's just a pragmatic kind of factual observation. That's not even a theoretical or ideological debate, right? I'm not professing any sentiment or ism by saying that poverty is like have overrun these cities in America, right? To say that we do not have access to quality health care, that the educational system is not the way it should be. Like, these are factual discussions, and even Republicans can agree to that, right? So we should be able to have these discussions and dialogues in a very open and as Rosemary said, in a civil kind of way, because we believe in that, right? We believe in that. But, in the end, my kind of reasoning for pushing forward with what's happening in Newark, for making sure that we send a delegation over there, is selfish reasons too. We obviously think that we should help the people of Cuba, and I think that people around the world need to unite and be together. Progressives around the world need to figure out how to live in the world together and how to, have social advancement for all of us collectively. I agree with that. But also, the things that we are grappling with, the issues that we're grappling with in Newark are difficult issues. These are things that we cannot, that we don't have all the answers for, right? Which is evident by the fact that they've existed for 5 decades or more, right? We don't have the answers to figure this out. And when I was a principal, when we had trouble in school, they would always send us to other areas to figure out what they were doing to get what they call best practices, right? So you get best practices and you bring the best practices back and you have an ideological discussion and a pragmatic discussion, a theoretical and a practical discussion, because you can't have theory without practice. Some of us are stuck in the theory side and we haven't practiced anything. The great thing about, right? The great thing about being a mayor is I actually have to put what I believe to practice, right? I actually have to practice it, and sometimes it doesn't work, right? And I have to go back and figure that out and sharpen my theory and get back to the practice again, right? And so we have to do that. So in Newark, grappling with these issues and listening to ideas of people that are limited, right? When you limit your scope or your ability to think outside of the present system or the present arrangement, then you limit the solutions that you have to the issues that are growing in your city, right? So when you do that, you in essence, you kind of imprison the people to a kind of small sector of ideas that only grow out of this kind of narcissistic view of the world, that the world can only exist and be successful based on the way I look at it, right? And so it's important for leaders to be able to expand that view. In order to expand that view, you have to allow a space for more intellectual information, for more social pragmatism, for more things to come into that space and begin to have real kind of discussion and dialogue that's not based on emperors or people that are in charge or corporate structures, but based on the success of people and the movement of people in these communities. You have to have kind of real and open discussion about that. So I think it's important for us to figure out how to tackle literacy in a place like Newark. I think it's important for us. Not only is it important for us, we can't transform the city without doing that. And so the problem is, all over America, we've been trying to transform cities without transforming people. So we have this fight about gentrification and all these other kind of things because we think development is about buildings and not about people, right? And so if we don't have any ideas about how to transform actual people's lives, then the development in the city, when you accumulate wealth in a city, when you bring wealth in, how do you use the wealth or redistribute that wealth so it benefits the people of the city? So if you don't have a way or concept to do that, then the wealth is always concentrated in one area of the city, in the downtown area, and that wealth turns hands around and around. And there are other parts of the community where that actually happens. In other parts, the wealth goes out of the city, and there's no way to keep it inside to help people's lives grow, or no kind of upward mobility whatsoever. So we need that literacy in our community. We need to be able to give people access to health care, right? So we have this dilemma in these cities where hospitals are closing and elected officials and corporate folks are going around closing hospitals. And part of it is because it's becoming very costly to provide medical care to people who use the emergency room as their primary care physician. Right, and we have to use the emergency room because people do not have access to health care, immediate and direct access to health care in their neighborhoods. It does not exist in their neighborhoods, and try to figure out how to make that happen in a system where we're actually fighting each other to figure out if it's even the right thing to do to give people access to health care. Right, so I mean that kind of, we're trying to give access to health care to people in Newark in a system where we're fighting with each other about should we actually do that. So it's important for me to get out of that space to begin to figure out how to offer it to people in the city of Newark, and that's important, right? So I don't want to, I could be up here all day, I don't want to do that, but ultimately I think, this is our first trip in terms of a delegation. Other New Jersey legislatures went already as well. So, New Jersey, we moving forward. This is not our last time. We're going to continue to do so because we want a normal relationship, as we said, with the country, with the island, the country, wanted a noble relationship with the city of Newark. And being a mayor, we have the ability to do some imaginative and creative and independent things that are not necessarily lockstep with what the country is doing in terms of their national policy, right? So nationally, they're throwing immigrants out. Locally, we're inviting them in. I mean, nationally, they might reverse the relationship with Cuba. Locally, we're trying to strengthen our relationship with Cuba because we know that it means almost life or death for the residents of our city. So thank you.
Our final speaker, as I said before, will be Marietta Ulacia, okay. The Executive Director of the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance, which welcome my sister, and when she finishes, then we're going to open up for questions and comments.
Good morning or good afternoon. I don't even know what time is it, and I really am glad to be here. And thank you, Rosemary, for inviting me. This was the last minute. I'm really proud to be here today. This is my first time on a panel like this, so I really want to share with you a lot of the challenges that we're facing. The Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance is a nonprofit organization based here in New York, and we do a lot of cultural work here, throughout the world, and in Cuba. And we've been doing work in Cuba for the last 14 years. And for us, there is no more important political work than cultural work. Because the cultural work is the one that is the free exchanges of ideas and of people to people. Before the word people to people, the phrase was invented as a political or as a legal conduit to have people to travel to Cuba. We were doing people to people. We were visiting people in their studios, in their schools, and trying to exchange ideas. Because we are the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance, and anybody who knows music knows that Afro-Latin means Afro-Cuban. Yeah, right? It's like before there was Afro-Latin, it was Afro-Cuban. And then everything expanded from there to all those countries in Latin America that have an African-based music. But the first music here in New York was Afro-Cuban, Afro-Puerto Rican. And from there, right, from there, we went, wait a minute, there is Afro in Peru, in Venezuela, in Colombia. So let's put it all together and do the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance. But the center had always been Cuba, because Cuba had always been open to all these genres and to all this music, and always been very community-based. Also, everybody knows that Cuba has one of the best conservatory systems, best music schools in the world, has the best musicians in the world. And so we started to go to Cuba to learn from the Cubans, to learn not only their history and their way of playing, their way to relating to each other, which is very different than the way people learn here in the United States. And I can attest to that because I studied there and here. And in Cuba, it is very important to work as a group. Before you are a star, you are part of a group. It's a community-based education before being your individual celebrity. And that really is different in the way you become an artist. You become an artist because you have something to say, something to share with your community, instead of you want to make money and be this kind of celebrity. So the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance also has a lot of education programs in public school. We have now 12 public schools here in New York, and very soon I'm going to open one in New Jersey. We'll let you know. And we also go to community centers. We have a junior orchestra, which is an Afro-Latin jazz orchestra called the Fat Cats. And we have a griot program. A griot program is a program in which kids from the community, regardless of their music education, can come and learn to read music, and also STEM is included in that program. Because we do this educational program, we've been trying to establish a program with the ENA and ISA in Cuba, which are the National School of the Arts and the Instituto Superior de Arte in Havana, to exchange both faculty and students. And of course, we're here today because we're talking about the challenges about doing all that. And there's a lot of challenges. Number one, there is legal challenges. As we all know, the blockade is a formidable legal challenge to do any kind of exchange. Not only because of the transactional problems, but also the visa problems. As you are probably familiar with, from the letter of the law to the practice, there is a big, big gap. Because you go and you apply for the visa, and if you are approved, you sometimes are not notified, or you are notified the day before, so you miss your flight. And well, recently, luckily now we have direct flights to Cuba, but before that, you have to get one of the charters from Miami, and you have to travel to Miami, spend a day there. So economically, it was very expensive, but also legally was prohibited because the transactions are still not legal. To give you an example, 1 year, I think it was like right before the announcement in 2014, I think it was 2013, that we were taking a group of musicians to perform at the Jazz Plaza Festival that we go every year. And there was a new person in my office processing the permits to go to perform in Cuba. And of course, we needed to buy the flights, and we needed to get per diem to the musicians so they could eat in Cuba. And we requested from the bank cash. So we wrote a check, and in the check, the person who wrote it said, I have to travel to Cuba. Imagine. It was a $30,000 check that was stopped. We were investigated. And the investigation lasted 2 years. And of course, then we had to withdraw $30,000 in cash and travel with all that cash to Cuba and pay everything in cash because we were not able to have a legal transaction. So those are some of the challenges that we actually need to work very hard to change, because that's insane. Every time we travel to Cuba, we take bags of cash. We look like we are dealing with some illegal, which still is. And even worse than that, the situation of the cash is when we invite Cuban musicians to come here and play, or dancers that we recently been working with a dance company. Well, guess what? They cannot get paid. So you have here artists of the first quality that cannot get paid legally in the United States because of the blockade. So, of course, there are things that people do around that, but they are not legal. So you can still get fined by the United States government. You have to pay them per diem, or say that they are invited and all their expenses are paid, which is not true, because anybody who travels knows that you need money to travel. So this is not right? And but we have a dance company spending a week in New York, performing every night, and not being paid a fee in the United States. And for the first time, now some artists in Cuba are able to establish entities outside of Cuba, like in Canada or in Mexico, to receive payment for their work, because it's only right that if, I mean, you are a worker, and you should receive payment for that work. So all of those challenges, we are still dealing with them. People think, as some of the panelists said before, that because things have been open most recently, that there is a legal way, there is a normalization. We have a long way to go, and I think the long way to go is legal, it is political, and it's regulatory as well. It is political because it's also, there is this atmosphere that is constantly being raised, an atmosphere of distrust among the two countries. And we need to work very hard about coming together and trust each other. And it is regulatory because every single time there is a new regulation, that regulation is not discussed or talk about it. So most of us don't really know what are the regulations that are constantly being changed, and that is on purpose. So you are always afraid that you're going to violate some kind of law when you are doing some kind of cultural work or when you're traveling to Cuba for whatever reason. But I think we, both the Cuban people and us, suffer from all of these problems because, again, the exchanges of ideas, the exchange of cultural work is being undermined by these policies and by these laws. And we are not learning or teaching the things that we are supposed to be teaching and learning, which is, in the case that I work, is music, dance, and all the cultural work that we could be doing together. And I think that's something that together I think we could change. We could talk about all the things that are problematic for the artists that are not able to come to the United States, that are not able to be invited. When we as an organization here, we're able to invite artists from all over the world, but not from Cuba. And when we invite them, it takes us a year sometimes, unless it has a big name. But that goes against our practices as well, because our practice is not like a celebrity support system. It is about the art, it is about the culture, and it's about helping all the artists that are interested in coming to the United States to work here and to exchange ideas, and about the American students and artists that want to go to Cuba to do the same. So, thank you.
Okay, we're going to take questions and comments. We're going to follow the same procedure. You can only speak once, and then until the second round, until everybody else has spoken and go to second time. You can only speak for 2 minutes, all right? Does everybody agree with that? Because we don't have a lot of time. What?
When do I get to ask my question?
You can start, Gail, ask your question first, since you got the mic. So. Right, where's the mic? Yeah, here's the mic.
Hello?
Yeah.
I'll try not to bogart because I know there's a lot of good questions. I just want to just express my gratitude for the panel. I think that this is really important information. It's important for, I think, those of us in attendance to hear from our sister, from a cultural perspective. When you talk about people to people, I think those of us who've been organizing travel challenges and delegations and trips to Cuba, that you're right, that others have monopolized that terminology, people to people, but we've been about people to people since the very beginning. So I think that's a very important comment that you made. And Ras Baraka, dear Mayor Ras Baraka, I want to just acknowledge publicly, you're my mayor. I live in the South Ward of Newark. That's right, that's where you were a council person. You mentioned a couple things that I just wanted to give gratitude. He referred to this policy not as an embargo, but as a blockade. And I think that's really very important, because too often that doesn't happen, right? It's referred to sort of as this unilateral policy, but it's not. It's really, I think, important for our elected officials to acknowledge that and recognize that. And I appreciated your mentioning of best practices. There's a lot that we can learn, and I'm hopeful that we can get some of our residents of Newark to actually participate in delegations and caravans and trips to Cuba. Living there, I can see the value of such a trip, and I know that you've been there. Your dear mother, your late father, your daughter went with with Dr. Mealy. So I'm hopeful that we can get a group of folk to come from Newark to participate. So I just wanted to just say thank you for being here. And now, other questions, comments? So you're going to need to come this way because the camera's here. And So we'll start here. Do you want to do a couple of rounds and then?
No, I'll do this side of the room.
Okay. And we're going to be brief. Sure.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nagash. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I'll be showing a sample of my film on Cuba's contribution to African freedom this afternoon. I just want to speak a little bit to the solidarity issue. I'm new to this, but what I wanted to say is, first of all, for those of you who stood by Cuba through thick and thin, thank you for you did it during the most difficult times. Now, having said that, I also want you to think about broadening this base, because in my work I've come to understand the reservoir of goodwill towards Cuba goes beyond revolutionaries. It is a larger camp, and it's very important to create that coalition, to have a much bigger tent, because what's at stake in Cuba, the injustice that has been done over the years, it does not require you to be a revolutionary to stand up and say, this is wrong. And I think there are people in the humanities, in healthcare, in various fields, but to have this larger thinking where this bone-crushing blockade has been going on for a long time, and we need to bring in as many people of goodwill as possible, maybe 10, 15, 100 times its size. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
We're going to go from one side of the room. And can I remind everybody again, please stick to the timers, because we got a long line here. Long line on both sides. Go ahead.
My name is Cheryl Labash, and I wear a lot of hats. And one of those hats is co-chair of the National Network on Cuba. Another one is that I live in Detroit. And I'm so grateful that Mayor Baraka is here, because I don't have to give my Detroit talk about finding a way to unite what Cuba has learned and shown the world with the problems that are being faced in our city. I don't think anybody in this room is confused about the intention of the United States government. I don't think any of us are. But the question is, how do we reach out? How do we make those connections? The infant mortality in Detroit is the same. The illiteracy in Detroit is the same. All of these things. The ambassador, the Cuban ambassador, was just in Michigan. It opened doors for us. We have people who are elected officials who now are interested. We have Wayne County commissioners who are now interested. Maybe they can help us do community outreach that brings, and I videoed your talk, and we're going to show that in Detroit for sure. So it's not exclusive. It's not one or the other. There's ideology, but there is practice. So let's find a way to reach out to the communities here in New York City that need to hear this message and will be mobilized to struggle even harder. Thank you very much.
My name is Nellie Bailey. I've been a member of the Cuba Solidarity Movement for the past 30 years, and I am a Harlem organizer. I was so pleased to hear the address of Dr. Mealy and the mayor talking specifically about the ideological rigidity of the left that is high on theory. I mean literally high on theory, but low on practice. And if we recognize that, how do we come out of this conference not only addressing that rigidity, but what structural changes are we going to talk about with respect to the implementation of practice? And would you address that, please? And I think we can start with the good mayor of New Jersey and Newark. Newark. Well, we're gonna make you governor. You need to be governor. Patrick Leahy and others introduced a bipartisan resolution amendment to end the blockade against Cuba. And it was so important to reach out to that office, whether we dislike him or not. And that's the new reality. That's the new paradigm that Mayor Baraka has talked about. So how do we begin to implement that structurally within a movement that seems to be happy with inviting the choir? We need to go beyond the choir. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to respond now, or do you want to take a couple questions to respond? You want to respond?
No, let's
go ahead.
respond now. Yeah, let's do it. People talk.
Well, thank you. Well, I think ultimately you, at the end of it, kind of stated what needs to be done is that we have to stop just having meetings with each other and begin to invite other people into our spaces. You know, my father used to say a long time ago, I used to hear him talk about, when he was talking about the Gary Convention, he used to say, we agreed, there were 10 items. Everybody agreed on 7 of the items, and item 3 and 4, people disagreed with, and they broke the whole thing down because it was 2 items out of the 10 that that people didn't agree upon. I think we just have to be more sophisticated than that and begin to have what I think Dr. Milley talked about is the kind of unity where we know we have to struggle with each other around specific things, but the overall issue is more important. You just have, if you just take example from what's happening in the country, the fact that all these people know that the president now is like, has Steve Bannon in there, these guys are racist, they have these kind of fascist, anti-Semitic views, anti-immigrant views. They keep trying to make us accept that and normalize that process for the sake of the entire country, right? In order for us to preserve the American idea of government, we have to tolerate this kind of racial craziness that's going on. And so they are willing to that extreme to have everybody unite simply to show face and unity to the rest of the world that the American system is solid and strong despite all of this stuff that's going on. And we don't have that same sophistication in terms of, you know, our struggle, which I think is a lot more serious and important that we're dealing with. We just have to be sophisticated at that level to know that we're not going to agree. I mean, I don't know anybody I agree with everything on. I don't know if those people exist, right? But you have to be willing to be principled enough to struggle around ideas, but at the same time understand that the unifying cause is more important.
Hello, Son. Yeah, my name is Dr. Peter Miller. I'm with the July 26th. Hello? Okay. I'm with the July 26th Coalition in the Boston area.
Testing.
Okay, is this better? Okay. I have a question for Mayor Baraka, especially a good one to follow the last exchange. There was a movement that began last year, a campaign. It began after a visit from ECAP to the Bay Area in California, with Richmond and Oakland and Berkeley, and it was supported as one of the 9 campaigns to support by the National Network on Cuba for the coming year. And it's a campaign to get local and state legislatures, city councils, to pass resolutions to support the end of the embargo, the end of the blockade. There'll be a workshop on that this afternoon. We've got more cities signing on. Hartford's due to pass one tomorrow. Albany is leading an effort for a state resolution. My question is, can we count on you to help lead the development of a resolution out of Newark that would sort of be a capstone to your presentation and would make a huge difference to this movement. And we could use the talk that you gave as one of the sort of leading, pieces of this movement. Can we count on you to help with that?
So obviously I need more information about it. That's number one. And you got to talk to me in depth about what's going on, not just here. And secondly, I could definitely be supportive of something like that, but you have to do the organizing of the legislatures in my city, and I can help do that because I'm not going to organize it for you. You could come and organize the legislators, and I'll be a part of what you're trying to do and tell them that I support it. If I agree with it, I'll support it. And the legislators have to vote on that, obviously. And it doesn't sound like anything that I wouldn't support, but, we have to talk about it, and we have to get a strategy to get the legislators.
I can say that the speech that you gave was one of the kind of speeches that people would give to city councils throughout the country. And to hear the mayor of a major city give the kind of presentation that you did was very inspiring.
Thank you.
I just have two pieces of information that I'm sure is going to be brought up. There's two pieces of legislation now that, Nellie, I think that, we can pull up our sleeves and begin to work on. And that is as was mentioned, the H.R. 351, which is notably it's the Sanford-McGovern bill. It's titled Freedom to Travel to Cuba, the Act of 2017. And this bill would actually do away with all those travel restrictions. Right now, what is it, 12? There's only 12 ways that you can go as U.S. citizens. But this bill would just do away with all of that. And the second would be the bill to lift the embargo, which is Senate Bill 472. And that's to lift the entire trade, quote-unquote, embargo against Cuba. So I'm sure in the legislative discussion, some of you will not be in that. So I think it's important that we raise that there's two concrete things that we can do immediately. And, we mobilize. We know that, if I may take a minute, we know that that health bill did not pass because people went to their congressman's office. They did it every day. They did it every day. And then they thanked him at the end. Do we do that? That's people to people, and we have a right to do that. So some of us may not be in that, but I say we got to put on our walking shoes again, and that's where we have to be. The anti-apartheid movement taught us something, for those of you who are as old as I am, and we can take those lessons. It's not about constructive engagement. It's about total repudiation of the laws that have restricted us over the last 50 years.
All right. What is on this side? This side.
Oh,
this side.
hello.
This
Is that
side.
me? Yeah. Hi. Good afternoon. Thank you for this panel and this whole weekend. My name's Gianluca Tramontana. I'm a journalist. I just got back from Guantanamo. I was 2 months out there recording Changui music in the city and the mountains surrounding. And I've been trying to get media organizations to send me out there to shift on the Oriente region, to shift the discourse away from Havana, because all the news comes from Havana and Cuba's a bit bigger than that. And so that's a little bit about me. And, I read the economics in the little 2-line thing. I got all excited. So I'm going to ask a real sort of dollar and cents question. So I've been going there. My first time out there was in the Periodo Especial in 92. I think I was out there, 91, 92. And I've been going back, I've probably been back about 8 times since at various. Now, obviously, there's a huge change in the last 10 years and 5 years, big time. The amount there's like a rumble of a stampede of people charging out with money to spend out there. It's also an infrastructure that can only handle 1/3 of those people. But anyway, there's people running out with full pocketbooks. There's hotels being built all over Havana. Each room in there will cost a Cuban nurse probably 3 years' work to spend one night in there. That's the amount of money that's flooding it. The whole island.
Could you get to your question?
Yes,
We have-
the whole island's going to tip any minute with the money. So my question is really on a dollar and cents term. America's relationship with Cuba is very, very long and historical and very symbolic. But economically, if the trade, full trade between the two nations was opened, where in that, like how important, it doesn't seem like financially America is important anymore to Cuba. The investment is Canadian, it's European, it's, it comes from many other countries. I'm just wondering where in the mix American economics stands in this.
You want to add, Sister, you want to
Yeah.
respond? Or anybody else want? Because people from the audience can respond if you want.
Yeah. I'd love to.
You want to respond, brother?
So can you summarize the question?
Wait, the question you're asking, right?
I can ask you.
Actually, why don't you come to the workshop on the Cuban economy?
It's in your packet. All right. I just want to remind people, I know that this is, interesting. It's just that we've only got about 15 more minutes and we've got several people that want. So if we can be succinct in the question asking. That side's next. You're next.
Oh, okay. My name is Sin K. Brath, and I had a question not for Dr. Rosemary Millie or Mayor Ross Baraka, but the sister from the Afro-Latino Jazz Alliance. Not really a question, but I wanted you to expound a little bit on some of the challenges. You talked about them a little bit in bringing artists or people to the United States from Cuba. Like if you have plans to bring them here, what are some of the challenges your organization or foundation might face in bringing them here?
Wait, where's the mic?
Well, the first challenge is legal, because although they may be recognized artists, you need to prove that they are. So to prove that they are, the artists need to basically amass a lot of information about themselves. They need to be articles written about them, music has to be recorded, and some of the artists don't have those materials because they are young, they are new, they are starting. So to invite an artist that is not already established is very difficult, because the American embassy in Cuba does not recognize that they are an artist to begin with. So that's the first, is legal. Then it is also what I call it regulatory, because the visa may be approved based on our history of bringing artists. There is a practice of not notifying the people that the visa have been approved. So even us calling every single day the embassy or the consulate in Cuba, in Havana, it have been approved, they say yes or no, they never have an answer until the day before. And that also affects us as presenters of artists, because sometimes you have a show that you have sold tickets, but you are not sure that that artist actually is going to come in, and sometimes you lose a lot of money. So a lot of presenters do not invite Cuban artists anymore. That is affecting the artists that have to come here. Of course, artists that are very established, like Chucho Valdez, that worked with us recently, don't have that problem because everybody knows who he is. But a lot of the artists we're bringing are people who are not that well known here, but they are really, really accomplished artists.
Okay. Okay, all right.
My name is Irving Lee. I'm an activist. I just had a couple of questions about the forces that would eliminate the embargo or blockade. The first is the Democratic Party. I know there's a split within the Democratic Party, and I realize that I just want to know what forces in the Democratic Party could assist in the process. Does anyone comment on Sanders' forces, what his perspectives are? Also, the question pertaining to the business community in the United States, or the forces in the business community that want to end the blockade? And the last is the Cuban community. Are they active in the process, the progressive forces within the Cuban community? So I just wanted to see whether address those issues.
Is any of the panelists want to answer? Anybody want to answer?
I can't speak for the Democratic Party.
I can't either. I can't either.
Well, let's just say that there is an organization called Engage Cuba. If you were to do the research of that organization, you would find out that the organization is basically made up of a lot of quote-unquote former members or either aides of various legislators within the Democratic Party, right? In terms of my research, and maybe that's why they were invited, but they declined the invitation because I don't know the why, but it would be really important for us to have known more about what their work is. We listened to a webcast a couple of weeks ago. That group is made up of farmers from Arkansas, apple growers from Winchester, Virginia, a company, the only company in Georgia that manufactures sheets, the only one left, trying to get into to Cuba to sell sheets to the new hotels, and they were trying to figure out an angle of how they could do that. And so the Democratic congressman said that they could do it because sheets are made of cotton, and cotton is a natural import that you can import that to Cuba. So those groups have found ways, angles, to be able to do some of those business operations. Yes.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I do want to say something about that. Because I'm registered as a Democrat.
Yeah.
So, and there are folks who, so when we speak about like the Democratic Party as an institution, as a group, you have to make a distinction between that and folks that are in the party as voters, as people in the city, in these communities. You have to make a distinction. Our inability to do that actually drives people away from our position. It is important for us to understand that there are many, many, many people in the party who are voting as Democrats, who would consider themselves Democrats if you ask them were they Democrats, because they believe that locally the party responds to their pragmatic and practical needs in their community and in their cities where they are. It's important for us to understand that and organize in that context, right? So if you organize outside, that's like people who, I mean, we can't organize to a point where we're running so far ahead of the community that there's nobody behind us. Because the only way that you consider yourself a leader is people are actually following you, right? So, because I mean, if nobody's following you, then I mean, you might be leading yourself, and I think that is important for us to talk about it in that context and begin to bring people along to our positions that way.
Okay, we're going to ask these two sisters, they're going to double up, they're going to follow me. We're going to go right here to the middle, I'm going to give you the mic, and we're going to try to do this in a minute. Is that possible?
Sure, if the brothers can do it in 30 seconds, we can do it in a minute. Okay, so I would like everybody to just take a deep breath and know that's the breath for life. And how can we, this is for the audience as well, any Reiki masters here? Okay, please start sending Reiki. How can we get to Cuba? ¿Cómo nosotros podemos ir allí y podemos mandar la energía del Reiki? Because I went there and everybody can be so stressed because of our country, we just all spoke of that. So how can we start making the suggestions to our healing community, which can do research in Cuba? I went with Ben, the artist, and that's my question. And if you don't have an answer, está bien conmigo. La pregunta. How can we who are the healing energy people, who don't have to even physically go to Cuba. We can send this Reiki energy. How can we support all the things that we just talked about? REIKI.org. And then the other part, just quickly, is Wednesdays, come talk to me, 10 a.m. I do activist healing, and I want all of y'all to be relaxed.
Okay, I'm very relaxed. Just to start, I love Cuba, I love the revolution, and I love the comments here about ideological, intellectual discussion. Cuba played Israel in the World Cup this past March. There's a boycott, sanctions, and divestment movement. It's an international movement. It's to really put pressure on Israel. It's to put economic pressure. It's to put political pressure. Why would Cuba play Israel? And this is a political discussion, a country I love. So this is not saying, it's not dissing Cuba. It's really trying to understand that decision.
I don't have the answer to that because I don't know why Cuba played. Does anybody who's from the delegation want to respond to that point? Okay.
Perhaps it's a theoretical question. We'll leave that out there right now.
But she does have a question about how people can go to Cuba.
You want to respond?
No, she would.
So briefly, I think that there is a country in the world that has supported the struggle of the Palestinian people. It's just Cuba. So thousands of Palestinian students have studied in our country, and they have studied even the high school courses at the university for free. So we will always support the cause of the Palestinian people, and we will do that at all international levels because we think it's the right for the Palestinians to have their homeland. Okay, so we have done that for many years, and we will continue to do it.
Okay, this is 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay, I will. No, because there has been many questions posed, and I was just trying to look to some details and information. Regarding the Palestinian question, Cuba has always been a great supporter of Palestinian cause, and this is part of our foreign policy principle. We will continue defending that the right of Palestinians to self-determination and to have an independent state with the borders defining in 1977. In 1967, then this is something that we will never renounce. Cuba is a co-sponsor of various resolutions at the UN General Assembly regarding this issue. This is a cause that is also defended by the Non-Aligned Movement, which Cuba is a founding member, and we will continue defending that. No matter what happens in the world, no matter is the position of the United States government, but this is a principal position of the Cuban foreign policy. It's part of our internationalism and solidarity, and we will keep it. The other question that was addressed, to how impact the lifting of the blockade will have in a Cuban economy. That was exactly the question. I think we finally, definitely, we will have the opportunity to have more a wide exchange of views in the specific workshop that we will have on that debate. But I was just trying to look at the sad figures that we have in the Cuban national report to the United Nations General Assembly on the implementation of the resolution that every year asks for the lifting of the blockade. There is almost $1.1 trillion that the blockade has caused in these last 5 decades to Cuba. Then you can imagine how many things we can do with that amount of money in our economy, and the lifting of the blockade will impact in all sectors of our society, because the blockade tab still prohibits Cuba, for example, to use the US dollars in our international financial transaction. Then we have to go to other international currencies in order to apply our international commerce. And no matter we like it or not, the US dollar still has a play to role in international financial transactions. I think an example has been put here about that. The blockade affects each of our sector of our society: health, culture. Concrete example has been presented here. Science and technology, the way that our workers can develop in their different spheres. one of the Cuban Women Federation's teams was just finally the life of Cuban women in general is affecting the blockade. Then the lifting of the blockade will impact in each sector of the society. That does not mean that Cuba has not managed to develop itself even with the blockade. And we have managed to achieve a lot of things that even in countries like the United States have not been achieved yet, as Mayor Baraka was pointed out. We have one of the countries in the world that have universal and free access to health. This is not something that can be said everywhere. We have equal opportunities for all citizens, women, black, no matter of our race, of our sexual orientation, no matter of our any condition that can express certain vulnerability. Cuban, we are all equals and have equal opportunity to access to all of those things. But this is not something for us. It's not something that is only for us. It's something that we have managed to share with the rest of the world, with our people from the developing countries, with our brother or sister, particularly in Africa, but also in Latin America and other developing countries. Because Cuba is there not to give what we have in excess, but to share what we have with the rest of the world. Then the lifting of the blockade definitely will impact decisively in our way of life, because we will count with that amount of resources that now we do not have. But at the same time, we are there and we will continue building our prosperous and sustainable socialism, which is perfectible, and we are exactly on that process. Somebody mentioned it here, that we are, that what we call in Cuba, we are updating our economic and social model. And this is part of this process, also that include that part of the process of normalization with the US. But I'm sure that we can discuss and give you more specific details and figures in that I hope will be very interesting workshop on Cuban economy. Thank you.
We have now reached 1 o'clock, after 1 actually. So, I guess I should ask people is it possible for us to take 5 more minutes? Because look, okay, I want to ask, so is it, the people want to, in recognition of the fact that we have a long line here, people, not that long, have extra 10 minutes for this discussion? Okay, and I will have to ask the speakers, you have to limit it to a minute. No, more than a minute, I'm going to cut you off. Go ahead, Gail. Pass the mic to the brother.
Okay, that means 10 minutes off of lunch.
Right.
Just letting you know. 1 minute, sir.
In the context of the U.S. government's change of policy towards Cuba, as we see, what is the U.S. going to do to make sure that the youth from Cuba, the new generation, have jobs once the U.S. government doesn't need them anymore? Once the U.S. government is, say, prepared to abandon the immigrants here from Cuba. The history of the U.S. system and the rich towards the young people has been what? In the Jewish community, it was the Jewish mafia. In Italy, it was the Italian mafia, the Irish mafia. What are they going to do to make sure that the youth have jobs? I'm talking about the Cuban youth and jobs, decent jobs with decent pay. Especially now, the other question is with their attitude towards immigrants and what they're doing, with the racism towards the Muslims. What are they going to do? Are they going to just dump all the Cuban young people? What are they going to do to make sure everybody has a job and can live a decent life without any, baloney or dressing?
Wait, yes, get them and then we'll respond quick at the end.
Steve Kramer, 1199 SEIU officer. This is from Mayor Baraka. While you get widely applauded here, you're among a minority of mayors who have the courage to stand up for Cuba and for normal relations with Cuba on all levels. How do you deal with there must be a significant Cuban population in Newark. And how do you deal with those who come at you, or in Newark or in the media, who come at you for the stance that you take on it? How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of things that people come at me about. That's just a part of many of those things. But the majority of the people is what's important to me. I mean, there are always going to be detractors and folks who disagree and argue. That's a part of the job, right? So there's the majority of, I think, folks are more concerned about how we're going to deal with these kind of social issues that exist in our community, issues around poverty, issues around unemployment, around access to health care. They're more concerned with those things, and you know, we get support around that. The heavy Cuban populations in New Jersey are in Union City. And places like that. I mean, in some places around the city of Newark, but not particularly, though we do have Cuban Americans in Newark, we don't have a very large population. Most of the Latinos in Newark are Puerto Rican, Dominican, Ecuadorian. So, I mean, obviously these questions always come up, especially among Latin American circles, and people have different viewpoints about it, and most of them are uninformed, and that's the point. Most of the viewpoints that people have are uninformed viewpoints, not just in the Latin community, but in all of the communities, the viewpoints are uninformed. And that's why it's important for us to establish a relationship so we can get real information and real factual kind of data that people have to go with and discuss around. Right now, they just get talking points and other kind of pieces that they hear. And most of the young people are not as bent on this blockade and all these other kind of things as older Cubans that are in the States now, right? So a lot of young people want to go back to Cuba. They want to go there and be a part of the economy, the culture. They want to find out about their history. They want, and we have to take advantage of that, right? You take advantage of that and begin to, you know, give them opportunities to go back and learn about their own country, right? And expand their viewpoint of what's actually happening there. But I don't get I get Twitter, Facebook negativity. Few people show up to different events, but for the most part, the majority of the people, even moderate folks, you know, are interested in normalizing relations with Cuba. I don't want us to believe that the majority of the folks are opposed to that, because that's not true.
Wait.
Ray, can you come over here? All right. 60 seconds, sir.
Thank you. Like many of you, my questions tend to be political. However, I had the luxury to go to Cuba for 24 days, and I was in the Oriente province. I visited Bayamo, Holguin, and Santiago. So I was pleasantly surprised. I was actually shocked to see the commitment of the Cuban government to the arts. Performing arts, things on the streets, sculptures, children dancing and practicing in the parks. So I have a question for the sister who said that art is the most important tools. It certainly is one of the best. Maybe it's a complicated question, but can you describe for us quickly what is the mechanism by which art is used to change the society, and why is it so important?
Excellent. Excellent. Can we just get the other two questions? These are going to be last two questions over here, and then we're going to let everybody respond. So
Well, I said that art and culture. No, I'm answering?
No, we're going to let them ask their questions,
Okay.
and then we're going to give everybody give you, Rosemary and Roz, the final 2 minutes, okay? Go ahead.
First, my name is Frank Vergara. I've been in the Cuba Solidarity Movement for over 40 years. I represent QAC at Google Groups, Pro Libertad, and I'm here to give you a message from the Cuba Committee in Puerto Rico, Milagros Rivera. They are with you, and they unfortunately couldn't be here today. I have two short points. One is I want you to welcome one of our national heroes, Don Rafael Cancel Miranda.
We did that, Frankie.
Stand up for this brother, okay?
Frankie, we did that. Go ahead.
And two, recognition that Oscar Lopez Rivera is free. okay? I want to make a very short response to the age-old criticism about preaching to the choir, a criticism that's old as winter, and that is that today I'm glad to see that some of the choir is still here. The issue is not preaching to the choir. The issue is that we in the choir have to get our shit together to bring about an end to the continued attacks of the US government against Cuba. My concrete question is, how do we concretely incorporate the issue of culture as a weapon into the Cuba Solidarity movement? Because we've been speaking about it for at least 40 years that I can remember, but there's still a lot lacking in the relationship of the Cuba Solidarity movement to our cultural artists. We fought for years to make sure they weren't at the end of all our programs. And that's my question. I think there has to be a concrete response to that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, you want to, Jason, and then that's going to be.
Hi, my name is Jason Corley of the July 26th Coalition, Cuba C Coalition here in New York. Very quickly, 20 years ago in the late 90s, I met Ross Baraka during the organizing of the first US-Cuba Youth Exchange. The opportunities to draw more youth to these activities is even greater now, and I could say that just from a lot of the discussions that some of us have had on college campuses this past week. So thank you, Ross Baraka, for some of your statements. I would suggest reading a book by Fidel Castro. No, it was by Marta Harnica, called From Makata to Victory, Fidel Castro's Political Strategy. It has a lot to do with building movements, united movements, without sacrificing principles. Question. What's Google doing in Cuba? If you could say a little bit more about that, I think that's significant. And what was the name of the U.S. company that you said Cuba is selling charcoal to, I believe? Thank you.
All right, so with that, we're going to let each of the panelists have 2 minutes, and then we're going to end. And you're going to keep to your 2 minutes, right? You go first, Rosemary, then we're going to go across. We're going to go from left to right. No.
All right. Let me answer the charcoal question first. This historic deal, as I mentioned, was the result of an agreement signed between Cuba Export and the U.S. company is called Cohabana, C-O-A-B-A-N-A Trading LLC, out of Washington, D.C. So that answers that question. I had a senior moment. What was the other one? Oh, Google. Oh, yes. I'm going to ask my colleague, Peggy Gilpin, to come up quickly to answer that because, but just...
Give the mic to her and let her answer the questions about culture, because we haven't heard a word from her today. And I'll be glad to do that tomorrow, when we have more time. Okay?
She says not enough time.
Okay. What I would suggest that we do in the future, we do a workshop on culture, because that's also a very extensive subject. And a very important one, and this is it's not a coincidence. In the whole society in general, culture is something that is taught less and last, always. And if you have any doubt, the new president of the United States is trying to eliminate the National Endowment for the Arts. So if culture was not important, he was not even paying attention to that. But it is so important that he said, okay, let's eliminate the National Endowment for the Arts. Culture is if you have ever read some of the economic impact that culture brings to a society, you will be amazed. There is a new report out of the DC Commission here. I'm sorry, it's called the Cultural Affairs, the Department of Cultural Affairs of New York City, that actually put out a report on the economic impact on New York City that culture has. But for me, it is the most important thing is that culture puts aside ideology and unifies people. When people don't speak the same language, but they play the same instrument, or they are able to do plastic arts or theater, these are unified people. And I experience that every single day of my life when I see people who cannot agree on anything, but they can play together. And then they get to know each other better. A lot of the time, the mayor here talked about misinformation. And a lot of that is information, I believe, is on purpose because misinformation divides. And that's what culture plays a role, because culture always unites. Every time that you recognize in somebody else that person can communicate with you on a cultural matter, that is, you recognize what unifies you with that person, not what divides you. So you may have even a complete different political ideology, but then you understand each other and then you start to unify different societies. So that's why culture is a weapon that has to be used more in unifying societies, and understanding each other is a bridge with different societies have been proved that also have an economic impact in eliminating misinformation and poverty as a result as well.
I have been convinced. It'll probably kill me. I will try and do this as quickly as I can. Google, as probably all of you know, is in Cuba. They've put in new servers. You can actually get on Cuba on a very slow internet connection and get a response very quickly. But I got involved in this because the Bronx Museum of the Arts is working with the City Historian's Office of Cuba, that's Eusebio Leal, to replicate the Jose Marti statue that sits at 59th Street and 6th Avenue and send it as a gift from the American people to the Cuban people. That is a project that requires $2.5 million, of which over $1 million has already been raised, and the Atlantic Philanthropies has recently put up a matching grant of $75,000. Google, as you all know, makes something, or may not know, I don't know, makes something called cardboard, which are virtual reality glasses made out of cardboard. That's what they call them. And Google did a documentary about Jose Marti as their contribution to this project. That's the short of it. There is a long of it. You can all go on the internet and get up on the website of the Bronx Museum of the Arts and get lots of details about it. We invited them to come here today, but we were told, quote, in this political climate, they're not speaking at events. And I wrote back and said, in this political climate is when you need to be speaking at events. And the woman wrote back to me and said, I agree with you, but. So you see they're not here, but this is a really wonderful project. It really started at the behest of Cuba, and I hope that all of you will take a look at it and get involved in it. And I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody has after this, because I hear I'm going to be shot for taking up this amount of time.
Last word to Ross, but before I turn over the mic to Ross, I wanted to say that Ike is going to come up and make an announcement after Ross finishes.
Well, I don't really have much to say that wasn't said already. I mean, I was in the audience and I heard when you would when Dr. Miller, you were talking about the Stone Bridge, the credit card that you can use in Cuba. And I heard somebody say something, and I was like, you know, that's why we're here. You know, people are complaining about the credit card that they use in Cuba, but they use credit cards in America every day. Like, so I don't understand that kind of concept, you know, here. Or we struggling with the idea about Google over there, though we're going to leave out of here and get on our computer and get on Google as soon as we leave this. So it's important for us to, I mean, that's the kind of inflexibility that we need to really address and begin to start talking about how do we get people with each other to begin exchanging the ideas that need to be exchanged. I think that's what the crux of this is about, and why I support this ultimately is because we need to get people together to begin the dialogue around the things that are important to our social mobility, to our growth, not only in this country but around the world. I think people coming together is more important, almost most important than all of the things that we're discussing. Thank you.